Hi, my name is Wendy Monday. I'm a realtor in Nashville, Tennessee, and today we're going to talk about renting your current home out and buying your next one without selling that first one. It's a big topic right now because if you bought, say, 2020 or before, you probably have a lot of equity in your house and you also probably have a really good interest rate. So you're thinking to yourself, I'd like to buy another house, but I can just rent this one out instead of selling it. So I'm here today with Christian Poling with Steadfast Mortgage, who is my trusted lender and very good friend. And we are going to tell you the steps to renting out your current house and buying a new one. Step number one, getting a HELOC. Why should you get a HELOC first?
That's a good first step. Whenever you have this notion in your mind that you want to buy a second property, you want to go ahead and have that conversation with the banker. Getting a HELOC on your house will allow you to tap that equity while you're still living there. So a bank will not lend to you once you move out of that house. So it has to be your primary residence when you're opening up that HELOC.
Yeah. And how long will it take you to get the HELOC?
Usually those take a full 30 days or so. So it really needs to be top of mind if you're even entertaining this idea, because it's hard to do this in conjunction with finding your new house at the same time.
And it doesn't really cost you anything to get the HELOC, right?
Right. Yep, most banks will open up a HELOC with no closing cost or very little closing costs, at most maybe $500 for an appraisal.
Okay, so they'll send out an independent appraiser. They'll take an appraisal report of your home, tell you this is what we're valuing it at, and we're going to loan you what percentage of that value?
So you can have up to 85% total financed amounts of your appraised value. So basically your current mortgage is taken into account as well. So your equity position is arrived, and I'll help you with that. I mean, that's one reason to call me, and I can kind of guide you through these numbers, because that's what we do. But basically, both loans, your mortgage and your HELOC, can be 85% of the appraised value.
Okay,
Yeah.
So let's say you have a $500,000 house. You can borrow up to 85% of that, so you can borrow $425,000. And if you had a $300,000 mortgage, then you would subtract that.
Right.
And then you're left with
$125,000 HELOC.
Yeah. And if you don't borrow against that HELOC, you don't have to pay anything on it, right?
Right.
It just sits there. It's available credit. It's kind of like a credit card that you don't pay on unless you borrow it.
Exactly. So there's no risk really in putting one in place, and it's a good security blanket for other short-term purchases if you need it, but especially for a down payment on a new house. You have it available. Say if you open it and even 6 months later you haven't drawn on it, you don't really pay any interest on it. It's just there, ready to use.
Step one, get a HELOC. Step two, get pre-approved for your new house. And so again, before you go out and look for houses anytime, the first step to that is getting pre-approved. That way you know what you can spend, you know what you're comfortable spending, and you've started a relationship with the lender so that when we submit an offer, you have a pre-approval letter to go with it. Because the seller wants to know that if they accept your offer, you're able to pay for that house, like your loan's gonna close. So step two with the pre-approval, people come to you after they've gotten the HELOC and they say, here's the HELOC, how do you guide them through it?
Right. Pre-approval is, and especially in this scenario, it can be complicated, so it's good to have a trusted, local resource to walk you through the ins and outs of that. So we kind of qualify you based on the max that you can spend, that you can be approved for, based on a certain HELOC amount as your down payment. Then we can get into whether you need a lease on your house to pre-approve you for what you want. Some borrowers will qualify for a new house without a lease in place, but some buyers do need a lease in place before you close on the new house to get what you want. And that's what I'm here for, is to kind of walk you through all of that and tell you whether that's needed or not.
So if someone needs a lease on their house in order to qualify to buy the next house, does that mean they have to move out of their house and lease it?
No.
Okay.
No, as long as you get a 12-month lease in place before you close on the new house, then we're good as far as the bank is concerned.
And that lease could start like the day after you closed on the new house, right? Just as long as you have the signed lease, you have a security deposit, everything's done, someone is bound to move into your house by a written document.
Right. And it can even be a month after you close on the new house, or even, 45 days. So that timeline, we'll help you with, but it's not like you have to move twice.
Gotcha. I think that's something that a lot of people have anxiety about is, well, if I have to have a lease on this current house in order to buy my next house, does that mean I have to move out and lease something in order to go? And you don't. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. Step number 3 is make your house ready to show as a rental, and think of it just like you would if you were preparing to sell, because somebody new is going to move into it. So you need to declutter, you need to make any repairs, and you need to take really pretty photographs so that you have the best possible presentation online, and you get to choose from a lot of tenants who are eager about renting your place. And there's some competition because that's what you want. You want to pick the best person to move into what was your personal home. Step number 4 is talk to your homeowner insurance company. The insurance that you have now on your house, this is your primary residence, it's just you living in it, is going to be different than the insurance if you are renting it out to somebody else. There's greater liability. You're going to need to have that firmed up. Step number 5, and this is the big one, you need to decide if you're going to self-manage or if you're going to have a property manager. And Christian and I have both been landlords, and you still have rental property,
Mm-hmm.
Yep, more than one, yeah. We both are landlords now, and we have some great stories about that. But if you self-manage, remember that you will have to show this property to potential tenants, so that will take some time. You'll have to screen them, you will have to do credit checks, you'll have to do background checks, all those things for somebody to rent your place. You'll have to have a legally binding lease. You'll have to have something specific to you. Everybody will have to sign it. You'll have to take a security deposit. You have to keep that security deposit in a separate bank account because you can't commingle those funds for a security deposit, even if you're only renting your personal house out. And then you have to collect rent every month. Now, those are just the kind of the admin things. Now we're talking about somebody moving into your house, and they are going to expect whenever something goes wrong, big or small, that somebody's going to answer that phone and take care of it. That's just the expectation of someone who's renting your house. So you have to remember that any repair, maintenance issue, any of those things, you need to either be able to do those things yourself or to have somebody who's trusted, like a handyman on call, who's going to be able to do those things and is going to show up Johnny on the spot and take care of it. So all that to say, if you're managing just one property, then that time commitment might be fine for you. But if it gets ahead of you or gets way too much, property managers are some of the best money you can spend. They do it all for a fee. So we covered the 5 steps to doing it, and now let's talk about some of the frequently asked questions. And one is, how much can I borrow? And we talked about that when we talked about getting the HELOC.
So first step, get an appraisal on your house. They will establish a value, and everything is driven off of that number. So say if your house is worth $500,000, you can have total financed amounts of up to 85% of that, which is $425,000.
Good math.
So that's what I do. So if you already have a first mortgage in place on your house for $300,000, it's basically the delta between that $425,000 and $300,000, which means you can open up a HELOC for $125,000.
So you could use $125,000 as a down payment on your next house.
Right.
Yeah. So like you could put as much or as little of that down as you wanted to.
You can couple it with cash you already have, but at least it helps supplement any money that you need to help you get into the house that you want.
Yeah. Another thing about borrowing from the HELOC, you are going to use that money not just for the down payment on the new house, but if the HVAC goes out in your current house and you need to make a big repair, it helps you have a stopgap for any sort of unexpected expense on your rental property.
Yeah, they're a good idea in general. I mean, you can use it for maintenance on either house now that you own 2, or, furniture or moving expenses or things that come along.
How much house can I buy if I keep my current house?
Loaded question. That's what I will help with. So pre-approval entails a credit check, and I will look at the house that you're vacating, the mortgage in place, the HELOC in place potentially, all your other debt, and how much you make, and determine what you can afford on the new house. People ask, how much do I need as far as down payment on the new house, and that mainly depends on the price point. Up to about $900,000 in price point, you can get into a home now with as little as 5% down plus closing costs. So say that 5% is $45,000 plus another 15 or so in closing costs. Don't quote me, but that's a general gauge of that number. $60,000 for a $900,000 house.
Yeah. And then your payment, like as it stands today in rates, rates are always going to fluctuate. Today's May 11th, 2023, and they're, in the mid 6s, and so that would be about a $6,500 to $7,000 mortgage payment on a $900,000 house.
Yep, and that includes taxes and insurance and PMI, and we can get into all the disclaimers, but that's a general number. And if you exceed 900,000, then you start needing even more down payment, like 10%, 20%. So we can guide you as far as what works for you when the time comes.
Yeah. So if you put more down, obviously your monthly payment comes down. So if you put
Right.
10% down, it would.
You would drop it to $6,000 a month or so.
Yeah. And these are all just round numbers for you to kind of like get your mind around what it would cost to take on that new mortgage.
And pre-approval does not cost anything. So, I'm here to help. I can provide all this information to you while you're thinking if this works for you or not, and I can help you make that decision.
How long should you keep it as a rental? So the capital gains exclusion means that you are excluded on the profits of the sale of your primary residence if you've lived in it 3 out of the past 5 years. And if you get outside of that, if say you don't live in it for 4 years and then you go to sell it, then you don't have the benefit of that exclusion anymore, and that could cost you tens of thousands of dollars more than you've made up in your appreciation maybe in taxes. And so be sure that you understand what that tax implication is going to be if you exceed that time period. So it's a general rule of thumb to think to yourself about 2 years into renting it, hey, do I want to sell this? Because you will have to probably vacate your renter in order to sell it. Houses just sell better without renters in them, honestly. Renters are not really motivated to
Keep it clean.
keep it show ready.
Right.
That's not part of their lease generally. So you want to start thinking about 2 years in, but all that time, that 2 years, you've been riding the appreciation wave and maybe making some money a month on your rental.
Yeah, and it might depend on your family's goals, whether you want to hold this long term and just have that rental income. Eventually, you'll pay your mortgage off. Most people don't take 30 years to pay their loan off, but that could be a cash source, for a future retirement plan, maybe. So that's just something else to think about.
This is a little personal note, but my parents' first house that they had in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, they kept as a rental, and the rent on that paid my rent in college at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
Go Balls.
I know. Can you afford to be a landlord? So we touched on this a little bit earlier. Expenses are going to come up. Just like when you're living in the house, like there might be an accident, there might be a tree fall in the yard, the HVAC might go out. The HVAC might go out in the middle of summer, and that tenant wants it fixed the next day.
Yesterday.
Yes, or you're putting them up in a hotel and while you're getting it fixed. Things like that. You had that happen, right?
Sadly.
Yeah. What was that?
I paid about a week of hotel fees just because it was mid-July, and it was 105 degrees or whatever it usually is here, and the air went out. So, and I felt very bad for my tenant. So maybe not all landlords would do that, but I put her up. I feel like that was the right thing to do. So, that's a call you can make at the time, but that's part of being a landlord.
Yeah, it is. And so unexpected expenses are going to arise. There's a rule of thumb called the square foot rule where you budget $1 per square foot per year. So if you have an 1,800 square foot house, you're going to think, I'm going to make $1,800 worth of just repairs in a year. I think that's low, honestly. I think that there are times when you're going to make more, and there might be times when you're going to make less, but you need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, and banks sometimes want a little more money shown in your accounts. When you're buying a new house, you have to have what we call reserve funds. So it's another reason, if you're going to do this, to have a little money set aside just for, those circumstances that are bound to come up.
Yeah. Talk to me about the reserve funds that a bank would require.
Sure. A lot of programs, once you own more than one home, will require you to show, not only the down payment that's needed for the loan, but reserve funds, meaning money in the bank. And it can be 401k, it can be retirement accounts, but the bank wants to see that you have some backup money, that you're not spending it all on the new house and then you're drained at that point.
Good to know. Here are the pros and cons of renting your home out. So number one, you're benefiting from the appreciation as your renter makes the payments on the home. Yeah. Number two, you're increasing your overall assets and your net worth. That's a great way to build wealth. A great way to build generational wealth is to own real estate. Number three is learning about real estate investing in general. I mean, there are some inherent risks to it. And if you're comfortable with that, then you can really start to capitalize on the wealth builder that is real estate. And there's no better way to learn than by doing.
Yeah, I mean, this is one way, or a lot of people do build their real estate portfolio by vacating a primary and making that into a rental property and then moving on to the next primary and so on. And that's how I've done 2 or 3 different properties, and it works. I mean, as you get into. Not bigger houses, but in different areas of town. I mean, that's a way to build a portfolio.
Yeah, because buying a primary residence, that mortgage is the cheapest mortgage. That's
Right.
the cheapest rate you're going to get. That's the lowest down payment you can make.
Right.
That's the best way to get into a property.
And especially now that a lot of you have low interest rates on your primary residence and you don't want to sell that property that's attached to.
Yeah.
So keep it as a rental, you have a 3% rate maybe, and you will pay more on the second one, but at least you still have your first one with that historically low rate.
Yeah, which we may never see again.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about the cons of renting out your property.
Burn it down.
Well, I did have somebody, a tenant once, catch my rental property on fire, and that was not
That's a
great
problem.
That was a problem. It's not a great experience. The good news was I had really good insurance, and I had a great insurance agent, and it covered all of the repairs to it and even the lost rents while it was being repaired. So I did sell that property after all of the repairs were made, though. I just emotionally could not hold on to that property again. The number one con is there's going to be repairs and maintenance. There's going to be wear and tear. There's going to be calls from tenants. Like that's something that's just going to be part of your life.
Yeah. And you can, during the vetting process, hopefully you can identify a tenant that will be pretty low maintenance and will not call you for every little thing. And ideally, they might even be handy and can fix some of the things for you.
And if one of those tenants falls out of the sky, then I hold on to them.
I've got one.
Do not raise the rent. Just like let them stay.
Right.
They're worth their weight in gold.
There's a delicate balance there.
Yes, there is. One potential con is that you will qualify for less on your next house because you have the debt of this first house. And there's ways to offset that, though.
Right. If you get that lease in place before you close on the new house, then the goal of that is to offset the debt on the old house. So that kind of zeroes out and frees you up to buy as much as your income allows.
Yeah. And last con, whenever you do go to sell it, you probably are going to have to do some updates. You're probably going to have to do some repairs. Tenants are pretty hard on a property. Think about any rental car you've ever been in, how nice you were to it. So there'll be some things that you'll need to do to get it ready, but you hopefully have banked up some money from renting it out that you can use a little bit of that money to freshen it up and get it ready to sell. Every financial decision comes with advantages and disadvantages, and you just need to weigh these pros and cons and decide for yourself. Now, I feel like we can tell you some of our stories about being landlords. I already touched on the fire, so we talked about that, which is not a great time for me. And then, the hotel stay for you. I will say that rental property that I had that caught fire, I sold it really quick after I bought it. I don't think I owned it a year. And I sold it for much more than I had paid for it because it was a new construction. And I, had benefited from the time that it was under construction too of owning it. So there was some equity building there. So I did pretty well on it, even fire included. Yeah.
Despite the fire.
Despite the fire, yeah.
I don't have any as good stories as that, but yeah, I've had a range of tenants, pretty bad ones to very good ones that I really liked and were pleasant, and we became kind of friends throughout the process. So that's one of the reasons to kind of vet them in the beginning and meet them in person. Like, this person's going to be living in your house, so you probably want to get a good vibe from them before you let them move in.
Yeah, and a thorough financial check and a thorough background check. And you need to have really written down like very clear criteria for the renter that you're going to rent to, so that everybody is treated the same. You're not like really cherry picking, but you won't take anybody with a credit score under X, no matter what.
Right.
Or this mark on their background, regardless.
Right. And some pets. I mean, depending on if it's a condominium or an HOA. I mean, there's a lot involved, but be specific.
Yeah. But overall, as somebody who's rented out several things, I mean, including Airbnb, I've owned Airbnbs. My husband and I own commercial property. We own the office that we're sitting in right now. And this has been a phenomenal investment, and it's been great. And I do generally believe that my family experience growing up, when we were not a particularly affluent family, those rental properties that we had really helped our bottom line for my parents, and again, paid my rent in college. So
that's great.
If you can take on a little bit of responsibility, go into it with your eyes wide open, then it's worth it.
Yeah,
I absolutely believe
can be a great thing.
Yeah. The last question that people ask me when they start getting into this process is, well, should we just go ahead and sell it? Because once you've really examined all of the ins and outs of renting and being a landlord and you've never done it before, it sounds a little daunting.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, it's up to you. If you need or want like your entire equity, say you've got that $500,000 house and you owe a $300,000 mortgage, well, then you've got $200,000. You just sell
Right.
it, go on. You've got all your proceeds to work with. You are leaving the state, and you're going to be a really long way away from this house that you were living in, and now you're going to be renting, and so that's going to be difficult to manage from afar. There's some reasons to go ahead and sell.
Right.
Absolutely.
And a lot of clients want a certain monthly payment on their new house, and they can only get to that by getting all of their equity out. So that's a conversation we can have. You know, I tell you what your monthly payment is, and if it's too high with only a little bit of your equity, then you probably need to sell.
Yeah. I mean, this is all just a math problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Fun.
Yeah. Well,
Math is fun.
Yeah. Math is fun for Christian. That's why we're friends. Well, I think that's it. That is the YouTube video on renting your house and buying another one. If you have questions about real estate in Nashville, DM me, send me a message in the comments, hit me up on my website, wendymonday.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.